Tim?
I could have gone with the two.
There are a couple more, yeah.
I'm not sure. I can't tell from here, but I'm about to find out.
Sorry. Yeah, I just want to go. Excuse me. Where's the office? Okay, so then we have one. I'll be in and out as much as possible.
Hey, Margaret. This coat has been here for like 45 minutes and I have something to see. Like, I don't know where you found it.
Oh, we can no idea. Was there when you got here? Okay, yeah, sorry.
You, Margaret Atkinson.
Yes.
Barney Johnson.
Hey, hi, how are you? Good to see you. How's it going?
Good, I managed to squeeze in.
Oh, good,
When
good.
you give me a card, I knew what's going on.
Whatever you what do you
I'm fresh out too, so
Okay,
I'm
me
just
too.
as
Well, anyway,
delinquent. I have your
we
email
know
though,
where we
and
are.
you
Yeah,
email me if you have any questions as this is going.
Okay, thanks.
Hey, guys. So you know about no flash photos, no recording. Okay. I'll be sitting there. Like, guys, if don't need to, just don't do any of that stuff, okay? Your food over there. You can't take photos.
Yeah, fine.
Not to my knowledge. I didn't know it. They're holding them now.
Yeah, think about it. But we'll play it right. Right. We'll play it right. Okay.
The hearing of the Health, Education, Labor, and Pensions Committee will come to order. This is the hearing to consider the nomination of Betsy DeVos to be United States Secretary of Education. Senator Murray and I will make an opening statement. We'll introduce the nominee. We welcome Senator Scott, a member of this committee, Senator Lieberman, a distinguished former member of this body, who will make introductory remarks. And following the nominee's comments, we'll have a 5-minute round of questions. One note, we have Capitol officers here today who will remove anyone who attempts to disrupt the hearing. This is the first meeting of our committee in the new Congress. This is a committee, as will probably become evident as we go along, that has some considerable differences of opinion on a variety of issues. But we have found that we can sometimes resolve them in important ways. Last year, we passed what the majority leader, Senator McConnell, said was the most important bill of the Congress, 21st Century Cures. And the year before, a bill fixing No Child Left Behind, which President Obama called a Christmas miracle, plus 33 other bills signed by the president, 33 total. I want to thank Senator Murray and the Democrats as well as the Republicans on the committee for operating in that fashion. We've done that by showing courtesy to ourselves and to our witnesses, which I hope will be evident today. Before my opening remarks, I'd like to make a word about process. More than 25 years ago, Ms. DeVos, I was sitting where you sat. You are sitting, and as the nominee for U.S. Secretary of Education, and former Senator Howard Metzenbaum of Ohio said to me, "Well, Governor, I've heard some disturbing things about you, but I'm not going to bring them up here." Senator Nancy Kassebaum of Kansas looked at him and said, "Well, Howard, I think you just did." And with that, he put a secret hold on me and held me up for 2 or 3 months. You won't have to go through that because we abolished secret holds not long ago. And because we're going to apply what I would call the golden rule, the one that comes from the book of Matthew, which applies the same procedures to you that we used in 2001 and 2005 for President George W. Bush's education secretary nominees, and in 2009 and 2016 for President Obama's education secretary nominees. So we'll consider you and then vote, just as we did them. Arne Duncan, President Obama's first education secretary, the hearing was on the 13th of January, and he was confirmed a week later. John King, the hearing was on February the 25th, and he was confirmed 2.5 weeks later. We've received from Mrs. DeVos, and each senator has had available since January 4th, the committee's required forms. The rules require them to be in more than a week in advance. The FBI background check has been done, and Senator Murray and I have heard the results. Ms. DeVos has provided the Office of Government Ethics on December 12th with all the relevant information about her financial affairs. We will have a letter from that office on how, which will be an agreement between Mrs. DeVos and that office on how to deal with any conflicts of interest before we vote in committee on her nomination. Now, as for questions, Mrs. DeVos has met with each of us in our offices. Several of us have written questions already given to her. Today, we'll each have 5 minutes for further questions. Again, I'm applying the golden rule. One round of 5-minute questions, as was the case for both of President Obama's education nominees, was the case for me too in 1991. In those cases, following the 5-minute round, the chairman and one member ask additional questions, and we'll do that again as we did before. I'll ask questions, and I'll ask Senator Murray if she would like to do the same. Each of us will have a chance to ask additional questions in a reasonable number in writing by the close of business on Thursday at 5 p.m. And then we will meet in executive session next Tuesday to consider Mrs. DeVos's nomination and other business if the final Office of Government Ethics letter is received by this Friday in order to give senators a chance to review it before Tuesday. Now, following my opening remarks, Senator Murray will make hers, and then we'll hear from Senator Scott and Senator Lieberman, and then we'll hear from Mrs. DeVos. Betsy DeVos, in my opinion, is on our children's side. She's devoted her life to helping mainly low-income children have better choices of schools. Most of the criticism I've heard of her amounts to 3 things. 1, she supports public charter schools. 2, she supports giving lower-income parents more choices of schools for their children. And 3, she's used her considerable wealth and effectiveness to advance those ideas. I believe she's in the mainstream of public opinion, and her critics are not. First, let's take the idea of charter schools. They are public schools with fewer government rules, fewer union rules, so teachers have more freedom to teach and parents have more freedom to choose the school that best suits their child. Nothing new about it. In 1991 and 92, President H.W. Bush proposed start-from-scratch schools. He called them New American Schools. He raised $70 million for New American Schools Development Corporation to encourage innovative ideas. Then in 1993 in January, in my last act as President Bush's education secretary, I wrote every single superintendent in the country, and I asked them to try something that was invented in Minnesota by the Democratic Farmer Labor Party, something called charter schools. There were 12 of them then. Since then, there's been broad support for the idea. Albert Shanker, the late head of the American Federation of Teachers, endorsed those charter schools. In 1997, President Clinton said, we need 3,000 charter schools by 2002. Senator Hillary Clinton supported charter schools. President George W. Bush supported charter schools. President Obama supports charter schools. His first education secretary, Arne Duncan, described himself as a, quote, strong supporter of charter schools. John King, the current education secretary, founded a charter school or ran a system of charter schools. Congress in 1994, 98, 2001, 2015, always bipartisan, usually by huge margins, supported charter schools. 43 states and the District of Columbia operate charter schools. So over nearly 30 years, those 12 Democratic farmer labor charter schools in Minnesota have grown to 6,800 public charter schools. 6% of America's public school students attend them. So who's in the mainstream here? The Democratic Farmer Labor Party in Minnesota, Presidents Bush, Clinton, Bush, Obama, the last 6 U.S. education secretaries, the U.S. Congress, 43 states, the District of Columbia, Betsy DeVos, or her critics. I think pretty obviously she's in the mainstream. She's on the side of our children. Let's go to the other criticism. Giving low-income parents more choices of schools that wealthy Americans already have. More specifically, the objection is that public money shouldn't follow poor children to an accredited school of their parents' choice, public, private, or religious. Arguing against that is arguing against the most successful social policy this Congress has ever enacted, the GI Bill for veterans, which appropriated federal dollars to follow veterans to the school of their choice, Notre Dame, Yeshiva, Maryville College, University of Tennessee, any accredited institution. It produced the greatest generation, and it produced a model for all of our federal aid for colleges. $29 billion of Pell Grants this year are in vouchers. They follow the student to the school of their choice. Nearly $100 billion in new student loans follow the student to the school of their choice. Why is such a great idea for college students deemed to be such a dangerous idea for K through 12 students? Many of us believe competition produces the best colleges, and it might produce the best schools. Many scholars have suggested that. Ted Sizer, distinguished educator, suggested a Poor Kids Bill of Rights 40 years ago. Today, 50 states provide parents more choices of public schools. 15% attend a school other than their school of residence through open enrollment. 44 states allow sending children to public schools outside their district, 34 states within their district. In addition to that, nearly 400,000 children are served by 50 private school choice programs across 25 states, the District of Columbia, and Douglas County, Colorado. Congress passed bipartisan legislation with Senator Lieberman at the head of it, creating the D.C. School Voucher Program in 2003, to date helping 6,100 children, more than 1,000 children this year standing in line waiting for that opportunity. So there's been growing support since President H.W. Bush proposed the GI Bill for kids to let states who wanted to try expanding choice for low-income students, to today, where 2015, 45 United States senators supported the scholarships for kids that I proposed and that Senator Scott proposed for students with disability. 45 United States senators thought that was a good idea. According to the 2013 Luntz Global Public Opinion Survey, 73% of Americans support school choice. 64% say that if given the financial opportunity, they would send one or all their children to a different school. So who's in the mainstream here? The GI Bill for veterans, Pell Grants, student loans, both President Bush, the President-elect, 25 states, Congress, and the D.C. Voucher Program, 45 U.S. senators in 2015, 73% of Americans, Betsy DeVos, or her critics. Pretty obvious. She's in the mainstream. She's on the side of our children. The final criticism is she's used her wealth to support these ideas. I think she deserves credit for that, not criticism. Would her critics be happier if she'd spent her time and her money trying to deny children more choices of schools that wealthy families already have? We're fortunate that Betsy DeVos is the nominee for U.S. Education Secretary. She is and has been on our children's side. I support her confirmation and look forward to working with her. Senator Murray.
Well, thank you very much, Chairman Alexander. I look forward to working with you and all of our colleagues in Congress. I want to welcome our new members on this committee, Senators Kaine, Hassan, and Young. And thank you, Ms. DeVos, for joining us here today. And by the way, welcome to the rest of your family who I know has joined you as well. This is the first of many hearings that we will be holding on President-elect Trump's nominees to fill critical positions in the federal government. So I want to start by reiterating the importance of the Senate's role in this process and this committee's role in this Senate work. President Trump has the right to fill his cabinet with people he thinks will fill out the vision for our country. But that doesn't mean that the Senate should be a rubber stamp. To the contrary, we owe it to the people we represent to make sure every nominee is not only qualified for the position and free of conflicts of interest, but that he or she will put families and workers first, and not millionaires, billionaires, or big corporations. President-elect Trump was the first presidential candidate in decades to not release his tax returns, and he's openly flouting ethics conventions regarding his personal and family businesses. Now, some people say this means the bar has now been lowered for ethics in public service. I refuse to accept that, and I'm going to continue to hold the incoming administration to the highest ethical standards. This is what the American people deserve, regardless of who they voted for, where their tax dollars are going, and who is benefiting. I believe that in an administration where lines around potential conflicts of interest are very likely to be blurred at the top, they need to be even clearer at the individual agencies. Even while we in Congress work to ensure the highest ethical standards are maintained and there is accountability to taxpayers from the top of the government all the way down. So I'm going to continue pushing for robust scrutiny of every one of these nominees, and I appreciate Ms. DeVos has said to me that she knows the importance of transparency and openness. She is committed to addressing every ethical concern and make sure that no corners are cut, and that she would go to great lengths to make sure no corners are cut. However, I am extremely disappointed that we are moving forward with this hearing before receiving the proper paperwork from the Office of Government Ethics. When President Obama entered the White House, Republicans insisted on having an ethics letter in hand before moving to a hearing. In fact, Leader McConnell wrote a letter to Leader Reid making that explicit demand: an ethics letter in hand with time to review and an FBI background check before a hearing was held. So I am extremely concerned, and I can only hope that cutting corners and rushing nominees through will not be the new norm. Now, we're here today to hear from President-elect Trump's nominee to lead the Department of Education. As a former preschool teacher and school board member, as well as a mom who got her start in politics fighting for public investments in early learning, I take this issue very seriously. I owe everything I have to strong public schools I was able to attend with my 6 brothers and sisters. And none of us in my family would have been able to go to college were it not for robust federal support. We had those opportunities because our government was committed to investing in us, but I know that's not the case for every student in every community today. So although we have a long way to go, I am absolutely committed to making sure that the federal government is a strong partner to our public schools, districts, and states, that every student has access to a high-quality public education that allows them to succeed, and that we focus our federal policies and investments on strengthening public schools for all students, and certainly not towards diverting taxpayer dollars to fund vouchers that don't work for unaccountable private schools. That is why I was so proud to work with Chairman Alexander and so many others here today to pass Every Student Succeeds Act, which gives flexibility to states and school districts, but also includes strong accountability for our schools and reiterates our nation's commitment to strengthening public education, especially for our most vulnerable students and communities. This commitment goes beyond K-12 too, of course, because the federal government in general and the Department of Education specifically has an important role to play in supporting, protecting, and investing in all of our students, from our youngest learners to those in higher education, and adults and parents seeking to improve their skills mid-career. So leading this agency is a big job. It is an important job, and I consider it to be my job to do everything I can to make sure whoever fills it is truly committed to putting students and families first. So, Ms. DeVos, I am looking forward to hearing your answers to some questions, since I have a number of very serious concerns that need to be addressed. First, I'm going to want to learn more about your extensive financial entanglements and potential conflicts of interest. As a billionaire with hundreds, if not thousands, of investments made through complex financial instruments, many of which are made in ways that are not transparent and very hard to track, you need to make it very clear how you will be avoiding conflicts of interest should you be confirmed. That goes for your investments as well as the massive web of investments made by your immediate family. Despite starting off on the wrong track by not having an ethics letter complete before this hearing today, I appreciate what you are doing to provide this committee the information to understand how you intend to live up to the highest level of ethics and transparency. So far, you have not accepted calls to release 3 years of tax returns, but I'm hoping you reconsider that approach and that you are cooperating fully with the Office of Government Ethics. Second, I have major concerns with how you spent your career and fortune fighting to privatize public education and gut investments in public schools. I'll have some specific questions about how the privatization policies you have pushed have impacted students and how you intend to use the public trust and taxpayer dollars to support public education and not continue to undermine schools and teachers from inside the department as you have as an advocate from the outside. I will want to know more about the large contributions you've made to groups that are ideologically opposed to workers, including teachers, and that want to impose anti-LGBT or anti-women's health beliefs on public schools and the students in them. I will want to make sure you publicly commit to implementing our Every Student Succeeds Act by upholding the strong federal guardrails that are in that law. And I will want to know how you plan to tackle the persistent achievement gap. Third, while you have been outspoken on K-12 issues, your record and positions are not clear in a number of critical areas. So I want to learn more about how you plan to approach higher education and whether or not we can count on you to stand with students and borrowers. I'm very interested in your thoughts on Title IX and how we can do everything possible to stop the scourge of campus sexual assault. I was not happy with how you talked about this issue when we met. I'm hopeful that you have learned more about it since then and are prepared to address it seriously. I'm going to want to know how your personal religious and ideological views on women's health and safety would impact how you approach this issue in the department. And I'm very concerned with what has been reported in the press about your views on the importance of the Office of Civil Rights, which works to ensure students with disabilities, LGBTQ students, religious minorities, women and girls, students of color, and all of our students are treated with dignity and respect. And I'm going to want to know more about how you will enforce critical civil rights laws. And as all of my colleagues here know, I have a particular passion for early learning. And I want to hear where you stand and how the federal government can help ensure that every child is prepared for success in kindergarten. Those are just a few of the issues, so I am looking forward to a robust dialogue tonight. I'm hoping you're transparent about your views, open about your record and the impact it has had on students, and willing to make some straightforward commitments regarding the core responsibilities of this department and the role you hope to take in it. I will be asking you to commit to providing this committee with additional information and responses to all reasonable follow-up questions as quickly as possible. I'm hopeful that this can be a smooth process, but Mr. Chairman, I know my members are all here tonight. They are hoping for more than just 5 minutes of question on this critical nominee, and I hope that as we get through this, you will consider doing that.
Well, thank you, Senator Murray. I'm going to follow the golden rule. I'm not going to change the rules and apply to Mrs. DeVos rules that we haven't applied to President Obama's nominees or to President Bush's nominees. So we'll have a 5-minute round of questions, and you and I can ask questions after that for another 5 minutes. That's exactly what we've done before. Members of this committee have met with Mrs. DeVos. Some have already asked written questions. We'll have 2 days to think of more, and then she'll need to answer them before we vote. As far as tax returns are concerned, if you would like to bring that up, we can bring that up at our next executive session, which would be the 24th, if her government ethics letter is completed by Friday. I would note committee rules don't require tax returns to be reported by presidential nominees. The law does not. We did not require it of President Obama's two nominees for Education Secretary. If we want to change the rules, we can do that, but I'm not in favor of changing the rules in the middle of the process.
Mr. Chairman, may I ask
So-
a point of order?
What is your point of order?
I believe, Mr. Chairman, that we got a second round with the John Kaine hearings. I asked 2 rounds of questions in that case.
You did and I did, and so we, in each of the John King, in the last 2 nominees, Mr. Duncan and Mr. King, we had a 5-minute round, and then the chairman and one other senator, asked 5 minutes of questions. So I will
Mr.
I
Chairman,
will ask 5 minutes of questions, and I will give to Senator Murray the opportunity to be the other senator who does that.
Well, Mr. Chairman, I would just say that nobody asked for additional time at that point. So I hope that as we get through this hearing, we hear members' questions, we'll have an opportunity to revisit.
Well, I appreciate the request, but I'm not going to change the rules in the middle of the game.
I was not aware those were rules.
That is the precedent that we followed as far back in 1991 when I was the Education Secretary. We did it for both of President Obama's, and we're going to do the same thing for
Well,
Mrs.
again,
DeVos.
I wasn't aware that there was a precedent, but I would like to,
That's as clear a precedent as I can think of.
well, Mr. Chairman, I would also like to have 36 letters signed by 133 organizations expressing concern or opposition to this nomination to be placed in the record.
They will be. We welcome the nominee, Ms. DeVos, to the hearing, and we welcome your husband and your daughters, your son, your daughter-in-law, and your son-in-law, and we welcome all of our other guests here. Mrs. DeVos will be introduced first, as I said, by Senator Tim Scott, a member of this committee, a strong champion for education. Then she'll be introduced by Senator Joe Lieberman, who served here for 24 years, representing Connecticut until he retired in January 2013. Thank you both for joining us. I've already said what I have to say about Mrs. DeVos. I think she'll be an excellent Secretary of Education, so I think we should move ahead with Senator Scott's introduction. You may then turn it over to Senator Lieberman. Then we'll hear from Mrs. DeVos, and then we'll begin our questions. Senator Scott.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I will note that I am surprised at the number of folks, photographers, who've showed up to hear Senator Lieberman's introduction. So very well done, Senator Lieberman. I've known the DeVos family for about 3 decades. I started learning how to sell when I was in college, and it was a part of one of the DeVos companies that I learned how to sell. So I'm very thankful that a champion of public education, a champion of education, and specifically a champion of education for poor kids sits to my left. I will recall my own upbringing as a poor kid who, by the time I was in the 4th grade, attended 4 different schools. It's really important for us to recognize the powerful impact that education has specifically on poor kids. So I am excited about this transition, looking forward to the opportunity to have Betsy DeVos as our champion for all children, for all education, but specifically for what I consider high potential kids, others call at-risk kids. For the last 28 years, Ms. DeVos has been a champion for those kids. A lifelong resident of Michigan, she attended Calvin College in Grand Rapids, Michigan. Mrs. DeVos is a businesswoman and an entrepreneur. She is the chairman of the American Federation for Children and the WinQuest Group. For those of you who may not know Betsy, she had a humble beginning. Her parents mortgaged everything they had to start a small auto parts business. She still remembers when she was 7 years old, helping her father paint a cinder block building that became the office and the first manufacturing location. I believe the color was steel blue. During the summer months when she was in college, Betsy worked the 3rd shift at her family's business. She understands the sacrifices that families have to make in order to build a better life for themselves and for their children. She has successfully advocated for expansion of education opportunity in dozens and dozens of states. She also helped her husband launch a charter school in Grand Rapids, Michigan, which is now one of the highest performing charter schools in her home state. I've been to that school. way before there was any idea that she might one day sit here before this committee, way before we ever assumed that there would be a Trump candidacy. Several years ago, I visited the aviation high school and had a chance to sit at lunch and talk with the kids, understand and appreciate their hunger for education was stirred by the DeVos family, stirred by the DeVos family's commitment to public education at this charter high school. She is motivated by making sure students go to safe and high-performing schools, whether they are public, private, charter, traditional, or non-traditional schools. She understands the need to focus on accountability, not just to have a system in place, but to actually hold schools accountable for the results they have. What she supports is holding all schools accountable, whether they are traditional public schools or charter schools. Bless you. Mrs. DeVos is clearly not opposed to accountability. What she is opposed to is holding some schools accountable, but not all schools. What she is opposed to is leaving children trapped in schools that we know are failing the very students that will have no hope if they do not receive a high-quality education. Bless you. Only one more left. Parents and students could not ask for a better role model or a more thoughtful leader to move the education system into the 21st century. Betsy cares. She questions. She considers. And then and only then will she act. These are the traits of a leader and a doer. I look forward to supporting her nomination throughout the next few weeks. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator Scott. Senator Lieberman, welcome.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, Senator Murray, members of the committee, and a special hello to Chris Murphy, my friend and successor from Connecticut. It's great to be back in the Senate today to introduce Betsy DeVos for your consideration as the next Secretary of Education. I met Betsy several years ago in one of the many bipartisan efforts to improve the quality of education of America's children that she and so many others of you have been involved in. When I left the Senate as a way to continue my own work on education reform, I became a member of the board of the American Federation for Children, the nonprofit organization that Betsy DeVos founded to provide better education options for lower-income children throughout America. I'm very proud of what the AFC has achieved, particularly at the state level. More than 400,000 lower-income families have been empowered with financial support to take their children out of schools where they thought the kids were not getting an adequate education and put them into schools that they thought were better. For me, as a Democrat, it is especially gratifying that many of these AFC state programs have been enacted with bipartisan support in state legislatures. None of the progress which the AFC has achieved very specifically for those 400,000 plus kids would have occurred without Betsy's leadership, which is inclusive and motivating. She is disciplined, organized, knows how to set goals, and then develop practical plans to achieve them. She is really a purpose-driven team builder, and I've seen that in my membership on the board of the AFC. Now, I understand that the Department of Education is bigger than anything she, or for that matter, most any of us, except for Senator Alexander, of course, has ever led. But everything I have seen tells me that Betsy is ready to take on this assignment and do it very well. I know that some people are questioning her qualifications to be Secretary of Education, And too many of those questions, to me, seem to be based on the fact that she doesn't come from within the education establishment. But honestly, I believe that today that's one of the most important qualifications you could have for this job. And she has many others. She's a mother and a grandmother. She cares about children more generally and has been involved in education like so many parents and local citizen school board members across America for almost 30 years. Her involvement has not just been as a philanthropist and advocate for reform, though she has been a real leader in both. She also mentors students in the public schools of Grand Rapids, Michigan. And here's another important qualification I think Betsy has for this job. She will ask the right questions, such as, is this federal education program working? Is it giving our kids the education they need to live productive and satisfying lives? If not, how can we improve it? An examination of the facts of the state of American education today makes clear that although current federal education programs are working for many of our children, they are failing millions of others. And here are just a few of the salient and, to me, troubling facts. Among all students of all income groups, less than 40% of high school graduates are college or career ready, according to the ACT. A recent report said that only 35% of 8th graders were proficient on the NAEP reading exam and only 34% on the math exam. In other words, about 2/3 of 8th graders in our country are not proficient in reading and math. Proficient is the middle, as the members of the committee know, middle ranking under the NAEP. Among lower income students, the weight of these shortcomings in the educational status quo falls disproportionately heavily. There are too many ways to illustrate this, but let me just give this one example. There are more than 1,200 high schools in America who have more than 1.1 million students that fail to graduate from high school at least 1/3 of their students. Some, as many as more than half the students, don't make it to high school graduation. And these schools primarily educate low-income students and students of color. These low graduation rate high schools are located in both urban and rural areas, and they're in almost every state. New York has 199 of them, Georgia 115, California 105, and Alabama and Mississippi each more than 50. These are jarring numbers, and I think they cry out for national education reform. We're just not keeping our founders' promise of equal opportunity. We're not preparing the next generation of Americans to enable our economy to compete successfully in the world. We just can't accept the status quo in education anymore. We need a change agent and an education reformer to be education secretary. A leader who has one big goal, which is to give every child in America, regardless of family income or zip code, a first-class education. And that is exactly the kind of education secretary I believe Betsy DeVos can and will be. Now, because Betsy has been fighting for reform and disrupting the status quo for so long, her nomination is naturally controversial. After all, she has directly challenged the education establishment by supporting charter schools and other school choice programs. But I can tell you that in all my work with her, I have never heard Betsy speak against our public school system. I have heard her ask what we can do for the low-income kids who are trapped in bad public schools until we can make more of our public schools as good as they should be. Is it fair to stand back and not help the parents who want better for their children but can't get it just because they can't afford it? Is it acceptable to have so many children from all income groups graduate from our high schools unprepared for college and the high-tech economy they will enter?
No, you're right.
No, it is not. And that's why, Mr. Chairman, Senator Murray, members of the committee, I hope you'll confirm Betsy DeVos' nomination to be Secretary of Education. I think it's in our national interest to give her a chance to change the status quo in our schools and secure a better future for our country and for all of our children. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Senator Lieberman. Thank you for coming back. Before I introduce or welcome Mrs. DeVos, I'd like to enter into the record 97 letters of support for Mrs. DeVos for Education Secretary from a variety of school groups, former education secretaries, governors, business groups, and others. Mrs. DeVos.
Thank you, Chairman. Chairman Alexander, Ranking Member Murray, Senators, thank you for the opportunity to be with you this afternoon. Thank you, Senators Scott and Lieberman, for those very kind words of introduction. I honor and applaud your lifelong dedication to the success of our nation's students and your fine public service. I want to begin by thanking my family for their support, many of them seated behind me here, except for my 5 grandchildren, the oldest of which is 5, so it was not advisable that they join us today. But I am very honored that President-elect Trump has asked me to join his team, and am grateful for his dedication to education. If confirmed, I look forward to working with him, Vice President-elect Pence, and all of you to bring educational opportunity to every family in this great nation. While we may have differences, I think we can all agree that learning as a lifelong pursuit is a fundamental American virtue. We are blessed beyond measure with educators who pour themselves into students. The schools in which they work are as diverse as the students they educate. In fact, all of us here and our children have attended a mix of traditional, publicly funded, and private schools. This is a reflection of the diversity that is today's public education. Growing up in Holland, Michigan, I attended local Christian schools and then Calvin College. My greatest educational influence in life was a public school teacher named Elsa Prince. While her students called her Mrs. Prince, to this day, I just call her Mom. When Dick and I became parents, education took on a whole new meaning. We recognized that other parents were not able to make similar decisions about their children's education based on their income or the zip code in which they lived. When our oldest reached school age, we visited the Potter's House, a Christian school which serves many low-income families in my hometown. We saw the struggles and sacrifices many of these families faced when trying to choose the best educational option for their children. For me, this was not just an issue of public policy, but of national injustice. I committed to do something about it, and it's become my life's work. I applaud the great work of the Potter's House and its co-founder, John Boy, who is here with us today. He and his team of teachers are doing a great job. But here's the sad reality. In the past 28 years, the need and demand for these other options have grown unabated. I share President-elect Trump's view that it's time to shift the debate from what the system thinks is best for kids to what moms and dads want, expect, and deserve. Parents no longer believe that a one-size-fits-all model of learning meets the need of every child, and they know other options exist, whether magnet, virtual, charter, home, faith-based, or any other combination. Yet too many parents are denied access to the full range of options, choices that many of us here in this room have exercised for our own children. Why in 2017 are we still questioning parents' ability to exercise educational choice for their children? I'm a firm believer that parents should be empowered to choose the learning environment that's best for each of their individual children. The vast majority of students in this country will continue to attend public schools. If confirmed, I will be a strong advocate for great public schools. But if a school is troubled or unsafe or not a good fit for a child. Perhaps they have a special need that's going unmet. We should support a parent's right to enroll their child in a high-quality alternative. It's really pretty simple. Every child in America deserves to be in a safe environment that's free from discrimination. Every student in America dreams of developing his or her unique talents and gifts. Every parent in America dreams of a future when their children have access to schools with the rigor, challenges, and safe environments that successfully prepare them for a brighter, more hopeful tomorrow. And every teacher in America dreams of breaking free from standardization so that they can deploy their unique creativity and innovate with their students. Our nation's schools are filled with talented, devoted professionals who successfully meet the needs of many, many children. But even our best schools don't work for all. This isn't the fault of teachers, but a reality that all students are unique, learn differently, and excel at their own pace. Students also face new challenges today. In particular, our high school graduates are having increasing difficulty accessing affordable higher education. Escalating tuition is pricing aspiring and talented students out of college. Others are burdened with debts that will take years or even decades to pay off. There is no magic wand to make the debt go away, but we do need to take action. It would be a mistake to shift that burden to struggling taxpayers without first addressing why tuition has gotten so high. For starters, we need to embrace new pathways of learning. For too long, a college degree has been pushed as the only avenue for a better life. The old and expensive brick, mortar, and ivy model is not the only one that will lead to a prosperous future. Craftsmanship is not a fallback, but a noble pursuit. Students should make informed choices about what type of education they want to pursue post-high school and have access to high-quality options. President-elect Trump and I agree we need to support all post-secondary avenues, including trade and vocational schools and community colleges. Of course, on every one of these issues, Congress will play a vital role. If confirmed, I look forward to working with you to enact solutions that empower parents and students, provide high-quality options, and spend tax dollars wisely. We will work together to ensure the Every Student Succeeds Act is implemented as Congress intended, with local communities freed from burdensome regulations from Washington. And I look forward to working with Congress and all stakeholders to reauthorize the Higher Education Act to meet the needs of today's college students. President-elect Trump and I know it won't be Washington, D.C. that unlocks our nation's potential, nor a bigger bureaucracy, tougher mandates, or a federal agency. The answer is local control and listening to parents, students, and teachers. For nearly 3 decades, I've been involved in education as a volunteer, an advocate for children, and a voice for parents. I've worked as an in-school mentor for students in the Grand Rapids Public Schools and have had the privilege of interacting with students and their families and teachers in ways that have changed my life and my perspective about education forever. I've worked with governors, legislators, and business and community leaders to expand educational opportunity through options that are making a lifetime of difference for hundreds of thousands of kids this year alone. And I've worked with many dedicated teachers who strive every day to help students achieve, fulfill their potential, and prepare them for the global challenges they will face. For me, it's simple. I trust parents, and I believe in our children. Thank you again for the opportunity to appear before you. I look forward to answering your questions.
Thank you, Mrs. DeVos. We'll now begin our round of 5-minute questions. I'm going to defer my questions until later, so we'll begin with Senator Enzi and then to Senator Murray.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Mrs. DeVos. I want to welcome you here and thank you for being willing to take on this kind of a project and to appear before us. I enjoyed our meeting last month and look forward to working with you as we consider your nomination. And then after that, you're going to be dealing with a great variety of states from high population to low population. I happen to come from the lowest population state. It has some special challenges in education, call it rural and frontier challenges. We don't allow a child to travel more than an hour by bus to or from school. And as a result, we have some schools that have 1 or 2 students. It's a little different situation than was even envisioned with No Child Left Behind, so I'm glad that we've changed to ESSA. The federal government, there was a Quality Counts 2017 report, and I'm pleased that Wyoming was ranked number 7 out of the 50 states in that, and in the area of financing education, we were number 1. And that comes at a time when our state's going through some economical suffering because of the Obama administration's war on coal and fossil fuels and the hardworking families that support those industries. But rural and frontier has some special problems. Part of them are that the submission of some of the applications and some of the applicable reports have no bearing on what we're doing. And that's important when we have the rural aspect as well as the Wind River Indian Reservation, which has the home of 2 tribes. And Every Student Succeeds, there are provisions to permit the Secretary to reduce the department's workforce. With the return of educational authority to the states and the elimination of federal programs, it's important that that workforce be reduced to ensure more educational funding is provided to the schools and not kept in Washington. Also, I'm troubled by the Government Accountability Office report that was issued at my request last November that showed the cost projections for the income-driven college loan repayment program are tens of billions dollars higher than the original estimates. And those estimates were based on data and accounting methods that were deeply flawed. You'll inherit that, and the current Department of Education's data lacked transparency, omitted key information, and made other flawed assumptions. As an accountant, I was appalled. Then there's the career and technical education that you mentioned. I appreciate your emphasis on the value of craftsmanship and also technology. I just saw the movie Hidden Figures that introduced people to computers and the value of women in the workplace in NASA to get them into space. I have 1/6 of my schools that don't participate in Perkins Career Technical Education funding because the low population gives them such a low amount of funding that it isn't worth doing it, and that needs to change. So, Mrs. DeVos, one of the most important jobs you'll have is the implementation of Every Student Succeeds Act. I'm pleased with what you said about it. Can you talk about your plans to engage rural and frontier states and communities in that process?
Well, Senator, thank you. Thank you for that question, and I too enjoyed our meeting in your office. I particularly enjoyed hearing a little bit about the special needs of schools like the Wapiti School that has the grizzly bear fence surrounding it. I think that is a unique need to Wyoming, certainly. But certainly rural schools and rural settings require different approaches and different options. And so I refer to the Every Student Succeeds Act, and I think the implementation of that and the Wyoming's plan for that will be particularly important to recognize the unique needs of the rural population that you have, as will many of the other states represented here in the committee. And when we think about the future, I think about the opportunity for more choices and options for those parents at a distance learning type of a situation, and the possibility that course choices or online courses could be offered in ways that they may not have been previously. And I would, if confirmed, look forward to working with you and some of your other colleagues that face those same types of challenges, such as Senator Collins and Senator Murkowski, and work with you to address the specific needs of rural communities and high rural population states.
Thank you. Look forward to working with you.
Thank you, Senator. Thank you, Senator Enzi. Senator Murray.
Mr. Chairman, it's your committee. If you want to go first.
No, I'm going, thank you for the courtesy. I'm going to go a little later. Thank you.
Okay. Ms. DeVos, I really am troubled by some of the comments and things you said about public education and how you see the role of the department you've been nominated to lead now. And so my first question for you really is yes or no. That's all I want is a yes or no. Do you believe that the mission of the Department of Education should be to strengthen public education for all of our students?
Yes, I do.
Good. So can you commit to us tonight that you will not work to privatize public schools or cut a single penny from public education?
Senator, thanks for that question. I look forward, if confirmed, to working with you to talk about how we address the needs of all parents and all students. And we acknowledge today that not all schools are working for the students that are assigned to them. And I'm hopeful that we can work together to find common ground in ways that we can solve those issues and empower parents to make choices on behalf of their children that are right for them.
I take that as not being willing to commit to not privatizing public schools or cutting money from education.
Well, I guess I wouldn't characterize it in that way.
Well, okay. Let me ask you about conflict of interest. President-elect Trump thinks he can resolve his financial conflicts by having his family manage his interests while he's in office. Do you think it's okay for family members to profit off of companies that are directly impacted by the decisions you will make if confirmed? And yes or no?
No, I do
Good.
not.
Well, we do know that from press reports, you and your family have invested in what you call the education industry. That includes investments in SoFi, which is a student loan refinancing company, and K-12 Inc., which is a chain of for-profit online charter schools. You told this committee that you would sever ties with your family businesses if confirmed, but you also said you intend to return to these businesses owned by your family when you leave public service. So how is that different from President-elect Trump's arrangement?
Well, Senator, first of all, let me be very clear about any conflicts. Where conflicts are identified, they will be resolved. I will not be conflicted, period. I commit that to you all. And with respect to the specific ones that you cited, one of them we were aware of as we entered the process, and that is in the process of being divested. Where if there are any others that are identified, they will be appropriately divested as well.
So from your answer, I assume that you and your family intend to forego all investments in education companies from now on.
Anything that is deemed to be a conflict will not be a part of our investing.
Okay. How do you intend to convince this committee that no entity will feel pressure to purchase, partner, or contract with corporate or nonprofit entities you and your family invested in should you be confirmed as secretary?
I can commit to you that nobody will feel any pressure like that.
Well, as you know, this committee has not received your required paperwork from the Office of Government Ethics, and they have told me they cannot provide me assurance right now that your conflicts of interest have been identified and resolved by the office. So again, will you be providing this committee with 3 years of tax returns that we've requested?
Senator, I have provided the committee with everything that's been requested and required of the committee, and I'm frankly very proud of the team that's been working very hard on my behalf to get all of this together. And I know that the OGE is working very hard to work through my and others' confirmation processes as well, as is the department. I'm very hopeful that we will get this resolved and to a point of resolution here very soon.
Since we do not have your ethics paperwork tonight, we've not had a chance to look at it, we've not had a chance to know whether we have additional questions, would you commit to coming back before this committee once we have that from the OGE so we can ask additional questions?
I commit to making sure we have an ethics agreement resolved and reached.
Well, I hope that we have a chance, Mr. Chairman, if we have questions, to be able to follow up on that. I just have a few seconds left. You have vast wealth, obviously, and you have used it, as you have said yourself, to influence the political system and elect candidates who support your ideological agenda. If you are confirmed, I want to know if you believe it's appropriate for you and your family to continue to use its wealth to pressure state, local, and federal candidates to support your agenda.
Senator, as if I am confirmed, as you know, I will not be involved and engaged in political contributions, and my husband will not be either.
Okay, thank you very much. I appreciate that.
Thank you, Senator Murray. Senator Burr is deferred to Senator Isaacson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Ms. DeVos, for your commitment to your state, your commitment to education, and for being here today, and congratulations on your nomination. I have a statement, and I'd like to ask you 3 questions in regard to that statement. This committee has established a task force on government regulation and identified 59 specific burdensome regulations that engage public education, primarily higher education. Of the 59 recommendations, 12 are totally at the auspices of the Secretary of Education. They can be invalidated and changed immediately. In 2015, Senators Bennett, King, Booker, Burr, Alexander, and myself introduced a bill to drastically simplify the burdensome and aggravating application process families fill out for federal financial aid, known as FAFSA. The University of Georgia, Emory University, and Georgia Tech, 3 well-known institutions in my state, have all said this is a priority for them to move forward and simplify the process of teaching, getting our kids the best education they can get. My question is, would you commit to working with our office to advance the recommendations of the task force on higher education?
Senator, thanks for that question. I'm aware of this task force report, and it sounds like the direction that it's taken is very promising, and if confirmed, I look forward to working with you and the others who have been working on this to implement the things that are deemed appropriate to be done.
Will you work with us and commit to us that you'll work with us to implement those items identified by the task force that the Secretary herself or himself currently has the authority to change? Meaning this won't be another government report that goes on the shelf, but one that will be acted on one way or another.
You have my commitment on that, Senator.
And lastly, will you work with this committee to simplify the application for federal financial aid known as FAFSA to reduce the burden of aggravation families to take on, easier for students to apply to college and to attend college?
Indeed, I will. I know that's been a very burdensome process and application. In fact, I recall Chairman Alexander's actually unfolding the entire length of it. It's a very long process, and I would look forward to working with you to
104 questions. If I remember correctly, Mr. Chairman, 104 questions. The committee came up with a 2-page, 4-question application that worked just as well, so it's an important way to improve attending college and getting financing done.
Well, and let me just say, I don't think we should make it any more difficult than absolutely necessary for students to be able to further their education.
Right answer. Is Mr. Boyd here? You referred to the Potter's House.
He is indeed.
Mr. Boyd, would
Boyd's
you
right
stand
here.
up? Could you stand up, please? I just want to thank you for what you've done to show the kind of leadership we need to help people who otherwise don't get any help, aren't getting any help, and may be discarded through life's disposal. You've done a great job with Potter's House. We have a number of Georgia investments in Potter's House. Appreciate what you've done very much. Thank you. Thank you. And that brings me to this point. Ms. Murray, Senator Murray, was talking about privatizing schools and talking about the importance of the lack of importance of charter schools and the importance of protecting public education. And she talked about her goal and my goal, which we've shared with each other, and that is to work towards preparing 4-year-old pre-kindergarten for every student in the country, because we think it's so important for the early learning years for kids to get access. We did it in Georgia. And how we did it in Georgia was taking faith-based educational 4-year-old pre-kindergarten programs and private 4-year-old pre-kindergarten programs and private institutions to provide us with the classrooms and the teachers to teach the curriculum in the new program. And today in Georgia, 61,000 4-year-old kids go to 4-year-old pre-kindergarten paid for by the state that is delivered by a variety of private and public institutions and entities. My point is, if you're going to meet the challenges of public education today and have to depend solely on the resources that are available to it, you'll never get where you want to go. But if you get the private sector making an investment in public education and have seamless standards that everybody commits to, you can greatly expand the opportunity of education, greatly expand accessibility to education, and do it through using faith-based, private, and other type institutions. Would you agree with that?
I think it's a very interesting approach in Georgia that Georgia has taken, and I think it's very similar to what Florida has done as well. And as the ESSA Act is implemented, I think it will be really interesting for states to take a look at some other successful programs. And I would also look forward to working with the other agencies that are involved with some of the preschool funding of Head Start and so forth, HHS, and see if there's ways to more effectively use those monies to help kids be ready for kindergarten when they reach kindergarten.
Well, my time is up, but I just want to acknowledge, in reading your testimony and talking to you in my office, I appreciate your recognition that the non-traditional student of 25 years ago has become the traditional student of today. Not every kid lives in a two-parent household. Not every kid lives in an academically encouraged environment. We have to come up with the programs necessary to train our kids to be able to do the jobs of the 21st century in different ways all the time. Congratulations on your nomination. I yield back, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator Isaacson. Senator Sanders.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and Mrs. DeVos, thanks for being with us, and thanks for dropping into the office a few days ago.
Thank you, Senator.
Mrs. DeVos, there is a growing fear, I think, in this country that we are moving toward what some would call an oligarchic form of society, where a small number of very, very wealthy billionaires control, to a significant degree, our economic and political life. Would you be so kind as to tell us how much money your family has contributed to the Republican Party over the years?
Senator, first of all, thank you for that question. Again, was pleased to meet you in your office last week. I wish I could give you that number. I don't know.
I have heard the number was $200 million. Does that sound in the ballpark?
Collectively, between
over
my
the years,
entire
yes.
family, that's possible.
Okay. My question is, and I don't mean to be rude, but do you think if you were not a multi-billionaire, if your family has not made hundreds of millions of dollars of contributions to the Republican Party, that you would be sitting here today?
Senator, as a matter of fact, I do think that there would be that possibility. I've worked very hard on behalf of parents and children for the last almost 30 years to be a voice for parents and to voice for students and to empower parents to make decisions on behalf of their children, primarily low-income children.
Thank you. In your statement, your prepared statement, you say, and I quote, "Students should make informed choices about what type of education they want to pursue post-high school and have access to high-quality options." Some of us believe that we should make public colleges and universities tuition-free so that every young person in this country, regardless of income, does have that option. That's not the case today. Will you work with me and others to make public colleges and universities tuition-free through federal and state efforts?
Well, Senator, I think that's a really interesting idea, and it's really great to consider and think about. But I think we also have to consider the fact that there's nothing in life that's truly free. Somebody's going to pay for it, and so...
Yes, you're right. You're
and
right.
so
Somebody
I would-
will pay for it, but that takes us to another issue.
I think
And
if-
that is, if I may.
Yeah.
And that is, right now, we have proposals in front of us to substantially lower tax breaks for billionaires in this country, while at the same time, low-income kids can't afford to go to college. Do you think that makes sense?
Senator, I think if your question is really around how can we help college and higher education be more affordable for young people as they anticipate
Actually, that wasn't my question. My question is, should we make public colleges and universities tuition-free so that every family in America, regardless of income, will have the ability to have their kids get a higher education? That was my question.
Senator, I think we can work together, and we could work hard on making sure that college or higher education in some form is affordable for all young people that want to pursue it. And I would look forward to that opportunity if confirmed.
Would you agree with me that if there is a mom watching this hearing who makes $30,000, $40,000 a year, single mom perhaps, who has to pay $10,000 or $15,000 a year for childcare for her daughter, that is a burden that is almost impossible to deal with? What are your proposals about making childcare universal for our working families? Do you have ideas on that? Do you agree with that idea?
That certainly is a burden, and I can understand the challenge that family, that young mother would face in deciding how to best serve her child's needs. Again, I think if we're talking about the future of that child and their education, I would look forward to working with you. I know we have common ground on a lot of things, and we could find ways to work together to ensure that young mom's child will have a great opportunity for a great education in the future.
There are countries around the world which do provide universal, very inexpensive or free childcare. Would you work with me in moving our government in that direction?
Senator, again, I feel very strongly about the importance of young families having an opportunity for good child care for their children. I'm not sure that
But
that's
it's not a
part of
question
the
of an
education
opportunity.
department.
It's a question of being able, very often my Republican friends talk about opportunity. But it's not a question of opportunity. It's a question of being able to afford it. How do we help somebody who's making $8 or $9 an hour at a time when we can't raise the minimum wage here because of Republican opposition? How do we make sure that those moms can get quality child care that they can afford?
Well, I would look forward to helping that mom get a quality education for their child or their children so that they could look forward to a bright and hopeful future.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Senator Sanders. We're going next to Senator Hatch.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We're certainly happy to have you here, Ms. DeVos, and I appreciate the abilities that you've exemplified, the eleemosynary work of your family, the care that you have for education, the hard work that you've done. I have to say, there are very few people in this country could even come close to what you've done. Let me just say I welcome you to the committee. It's a pleasure to be here today to consider your nomination to serve as Secretary of Education. I appreciate your commitment to expanding opportunities for all children and your tireless work in the field of education. Your record of service is in line with Utah values, especially your commitment to restoring local autonomy over schools. Those closest to students know what is best for their education. A truth you have championed as a reformer. This committee's support and passage of the Every Student Succeeds Act illustrates that these values are not unique to you and me, but are instead shared by many of my colleagues who care for education as a reality. All I can say is many of my colleagues' selections for this position have worked very hard to try and make sure that good people serve in these positions, not just people with stereotypical education, but those who might bring really new things to the forefront. And I hope, all I can say is that we've helped many of our colleagues we've ushered them through this process on both sides of the floor, and I hope my colleagues will extend the same courtesy to you. I also believe in extending presidential selections the benefit of the doubt, recognizing, for example, that a person's views as a private citizen do not necessarily reflect their future actions as a holder of public office. From my private conversations with you, I trust that you will not force particular policies on states, unlike what some in education do. Your predecessors have done in some cases in violation of congressional intent. I also recognize that support for parental choice for all students is not an attack on public education. My children, grandchildren, and great-grandchildren have attended public education as a reality, and I have to say that they've attended these schools, and I believe that you share my commitment to ensuring that every child receives a quality education, regardless of the type of school they attend. Now, I've spent my entire service here fighting to make equity in education a reality, and I believe that you will be an indispensable partner in this fight. And I look forward to working with you on the priorities that are important to the people of Utah, including increasing transparency, accountability, and access to higher education, as well as increasing innovation and evidence-based reforms. Unlike others here who may be interested in attacking your donations, I know you want to do right by all children, so I will stick to focusing on how we can work together on sound policy. Now, right now, the Department of Education does not have a uniform measure for describing whether borrowers are repaying their loans according to the according to the confusion, the department is using a different borrower repayment rate methodology for each policy it comes up with. A uniform metric might prove helpful in making information available to Congress, the higher education community, and the public about the success of former students in repaying their federal student loan debts. Now, this information could also tell us the extent to which student loan repayment rates vary across institutions. I believe students should have access to a wide variety of data when choosing a school, just like they would when choosing a car. Greater access to information would lead to wise decision-making when choosing an institution. Now, do you support increasing transparency and transparency regarding loan results for students and parents to use when deciding upon a post-secondary school?
Senator, thank you. Thank you for that question and for your kind comments. I agree with you 100% that the issue of student debt and the amount of student debt, over $1.3 trillion right now, up almost 1,000% in the last 8 years. It's a very serious issue, and one which we all have to, I think, pay a very close attention to and resolve in some way. And if confirmed, I certainly will look forward to working with you and your colleagues on ways to get after this issue, the issue of the cost of education as well as debt repayment kind of go hand in hand, and I will look forward to working with you and your colleagues should I be confirmed.
Well, thank you so much. I hope you'll be confirmed, and I think you'll make a great secretary.
Thank you, Senator Hatch. Senator Casey.
Mr. Chairman, thank you very much. Put me on record as asking for a second round as well. I know that's under consideration. Ms. DeVos, thank you.
It's not under consideration, but I'll be glad to put you on record.
We'll keep trying. Ms. DeVos, thank you for being here, and appreciate you and your family being with us tonight. I wanted to start with a basic question. Would you agree with me that the problem, and that's an understatement in my judgment, but the problem of sexual assault on college campuses is a significant problem that we should take action on?
Senator, thank you for that question. I agree with you that sexual assault in any form or in any place is a problem, and no disagreement there.
The second question is, would you uphold, let me give you a little background here that you might know. In 2011, the Department of Education issued guidance on Title IX by this administration, the current administration. I'd ask you, would you uphold that 2011 Title IX guidance as it relates to sexual assault on campus?
Well, Senator, I know that there's a lot of conflicting ideas and opinions around that guidance, and if confirmed, I would look forward to working with you and your colleagues and understand the range of opinions and understand the issues from the higher ed institutions that are charged with resolving these and addressing them, and I would look forward to working together to find some resolutions.
Well, I agree with the guidance, so I'm just asking for a yes or no. I guess you're not going to give me a yes or no answer on committing to upholding that guidance.
It would be premature for me to do that today.
This problem is, to say it's an epidemic, I think, is also an understatement. The Centers for Disease Control told us back in 2009 that 1 in 5 women are the victims of sexual assault on campus, and yet a lot of those women who were in that 1 in 5 never have an opportunity or never report incidents. So it's a major problem for women. In so many ways, it's the ultimate betrayal. Parents for generations have told their daughters, study hard in school, get good grades, because when you get good grades, you might have an opportunity to go to college, and if you go to college, the world is open to you, and you can succeed by having higher education. But too often, and it happens every year on many campuses around the country, too often a young woman is a victim, sometimes in the first day she's there, or the first week. and sometimes over the course of her first year. And her life is destroyed by that. So we have a long way to go to addressing this problem. We took some good action on this issue as part of the Violence Against Women Act. It just happened to be my bill that got passed into law, the so-called Campus Save Act. What we did in that bill was, for the first time, say to colleges and universities, you have to do more than you're doing, certainly on one broad topic of prevention and on awareness. So young men on the campus who are the perpetrators of this have to be part of the solution. They have to be part of bystander education, a preventative strategy. But in addition to all kinds of transparency and requirements, this is what the Act did for women, or for victims, I should say, or victims of assault. Colleges and universities must provide clear statements regarding the procedures followed. They must do more than they had been doing when it comes to enforcement. And in particular, with regard to victims, it says the college or university must indicate to the victim her right to notify law enforcement, should the victim choose to, that the obligation, the institution has an obligation to help the victim report the incident to law enforcement, including helping her get a protective order, among other things that the school has to do. So that's what the law is now, based upon my bill. The fall of 2015, this went into effect across the country. There's an organization called the Foundation for Individual Rights in Education. They support a bill that would totally change that. They would force a victim to go to police departments to report, and they would change the standard of evidence. Would you commit, as Secretary of Education, to retaining the standard of evidence that is currently the law?
Well, Senator, let me just say my mom's heart is really piqued on this issue. Assault in any form is never okay, and I just want to be very clear on that. And so, if confirmed, I look forward to understanding the past actions and the current situation better, and to ensuring that the intent of the law is actually carried out in a way that that recognizes both the victim, the rights of the victims, as well as those who are accused as well, and that the
I'm out of time, but let me just, the organization that has that position, which is contrary to the law, current law, and contrary to the spirit of what we try to do in that piece of legislation, is a recipient of donations from you totaling about $25,000 over 4 years. I hope that's not a conflict of interest, but I would hope that you would make a definitive commitment as the nominee to enforce the law as it relates to sexual assault on college campuses. And I'll send you more questions about it.
Thank you, Senator.
Thank you, Senator Casey. Senator Paul.
Congratulations, Ms. DeVos, and thanks for your testimony. I grew up and went to public schools and got a great education, and big fan of public schools. My kids have gone to public schools, but there are also some public schools that aren't doing very well. You know, even the Department of Education says about half of them aren't doing very well, and half the kids that are dropping out are kids of color. So I commend you for your work, trying to help lower-income kids and trying to help everybody get a better education. But I think the status quo just isn't really working. I have traveled to a lot of schools, though, and been amazed at some of the schools. I went to Josephinum in Chicago, St. Anthony's in Milwaukee, Boys Latin School in Philadelphia, and just amazing success stories. And you see the success in front of you where 100% of the kids are going to college. Just amazing stories where, you know, 50, 40, 30% maybe of their contemporaries in their community are going. So there are great successes. But I think we need to think about the kids. People get so caught up in, oh, I don't want any religious schools or only private schools and all of this. And it's like, look at the kids and look at the success there. But I thought maybe if you take a couple of minutes and tell us about some of the things you've seen in Michigan, schools that you've either visited that are a success, or just some of what you've seen that has excited you about the potential that all these kids do have potential and we shouldn't leave them, you know, behind.
Well, thank you, Senator. Thanks for that opportunity. I would love to talk about some of the schools and some of the individuals that I have seen benefit from the success of being able to choose the right educational setting. And I've already mentioned the Potter's House School and John Boy, who's with us here today. That's a school I regularly visit. The students there come from a multitude of different countries, speak many different languages, and most of them are from very, very low-income circumstances. And it's just amazing to see the transformation that those students have in going through their Potter's House years. There's another student here right behind me, Denisha Merriweather, whom I've gotten to know the last few years, who is the recipient of a tax credit scholarship program in the state of Florida. Denisha will tell you very promptly that she had a very troubled early childhood in her grade school years. I think she was kicked out multiple times before her godmother actually finally found a school that was going to work for her, and the transformation was just almost overnight. Denisha's the first in her family to have graduated high school. She's graduated college, and in May she's going to get her master's in social work degree. So she's just a tremendous example of what can happen when you get an opportunity to go to the right school. Nydia Salazar is also here, and she has her mom took her and emigrated from Peru because of the opportunity. She knew she would have a much greater opportunity to succeed and thrive, and so Nydia has been the beneficiary of a tax credit scholarship program in Arizona, and she's now in college and pursuing a higher education there. Those are two students. There's many schools that I see that are doing amazing things, actually trying new and innovative ways of approaching education for children. And one of them I'd love to mention is called Acton Academy, and it's truly a unique model in that it's totally student-directed. They form their own constitution, and there's no teacher in the classroom. There's just a coach or a guide, and the guide cannot answer questions. They can only pose a question back to the students. And the results from this Acton Academy are simply amazing. And the school is actually proliferating pretty rapidly throughout the country. So those are just a few examples, but I could give you dozens more.
Well, and is in putting a face on it and meeting these kids and seeing that they're going to succeed and looking them in the eye and knowing these young ladies are going to succeed is an amazing thing. And for those who have this philosophic hatred for vouchers and school choice and things, watch the movie Waiting for Superman and see the mom with tears down her face whose child got the lottery and won to get in a good school, and then the one who didn't get in. And Senator Alexander and I went to a KIPP charter school in Nashville, and we met a young woman there. She's got a full scholarship to Boston College, and I'll never forget, here we are, we like to talk to the media. The media didn't want to talk to us at all. They wanted to talk to this young lady because she was just an amazing success story. But I wish you the best of luck. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator.
Thank you, Senator Paul. Senator Franken.
Yes, I'm a member of the Minnesota DFL party, the party that the chairman invoked at the beginning of this hearing. Charter schools are not the issue here. Minnesota is thoroughly in the mainstream. There are 37 states in this country that constitutionally prohibit the use of public school money for religious schools. So it is the DFL party in Minnesota, thank you very much, that is in the mainstream, and not our witness or the chairman. Senator Lieberman mentioned proficiency in the NAEP test, and it just reminded me of this. When I first got in the Senate in 2009, I had a roundtable of principals, and one of the principals in Minnesota, and he said, we think of the NCLB tests as autopsies. And I knew exactly what he meant, because what he was saying is that the students take the tests in late April. If they're lucky, they get them back in late June. The teachers can't use the results to inform their instruction. So I saw that in Minnesota, that in addition to the NCLB test, a lot of schools, majority of schools, were taking a computer adaptive test. A computer test so you get the results right away, and adaptive so that you can measure outside of grade level. And this brings me to the issue of proficiency, which the Senator cited, versus growth. And I would like your views on the relative advantage of measuring, doing assessments and using them to measure proficiency or to measure growth.
Well, thank you, Senator, for that question. I think if I'm understanding your question correctly around proficiency, I would also correlate it to competency and mastery, so that each student is measured according to the advancement that they're making in each subject area.
Well, that's growth. That's not proficiency. So in other words, the growth they're making is in growth. The proficiency is an arbitrary standard.
If they've reached a level, the proficiency is if they've reached a like third grade level for reading, et cetera.
No, I'm talking about the debate between proficiency and growth.
Yes.
And what your thoughts are on them.
Well, I was just asking to clarify then.
Well, this is a subject that has been debated in the education community for years. And I've advocated growth, as the chairman and every member of this committee knows, because with proficiency, teachers ignore the kids at the top who are not going to fall below proficiency, and they ignore the kid at the bottom who, no matter what they do, will never get to proficiency. So I've been an advocate of growth, but it surprises me that you don't know this issue. And, Mr. Chairman, I think this is a good reason for us to have more questions, because this is a very important subject, education, our kids' education. And I think we're selling our kids short by not being able to have a debate on it. And I didn't know of any rule about this, everyone gets one question and then one other senator gets a question. I don't know where that rule comes from.
Well, I'll tell you where it comes from, Senator Franken. It comes from the committee precedent and the way we treated President Obama's nominees, John King, and the way we treated Arnie Duncan, and the way I was treated when I was a secretary.
But
I'm
all
going
of
to
us
apply,
have more
I'm applying the
questions.
same rules to them, to Secretary DeVos, or to Mrs. DeVos.
Well, I think we're selling our kids short by not being able to ask follow-up questions. And I was kind of surprised, well, I'm not that surprised, that you did not know this issue. Mrs. DeVos, your family has a long history of supporting anti-LGBT causes, including donating millions of dollars to groups that push conversion therapy, the practice of trying to change someone's sexual orientation or gender identity. For example, you and your family have given over $10 million to Focus on the Family, an organization that currently states on its website that, quote, homosexual strugglers can and do change their sexual behavior and identity. Mrs. DeVos, conversion therapy has been widely discredited and rejected for decades by every mainstream medical and mental health organization as neither medically nor ethically appropriate. It has been shown to lead to depression, anxiety, drug use, homelessness, and suicide, particularly in LGBT youth. In fact, many of the leaders and founders of conversion therapy, including both religious ministries and mental health professionals, have not only publicly renounced it, but have issued formal apologies for their work and how harmful it has been to the individuals involved. Mr. Chairman, I would ask that this be included in the record.
It will be.
Mrs. DeVos, do you still believe in conversion therapy?
Senator Franken, I've never believed in that. First of all, let me say I fully embrace equality, and I believe in the innate value of every single human being, and that all students, no matter their age, should be able to attend a school and feel safe and be free of discrimination. So let's start there. And let me just say that your characterization of contributions, I don't think accurately reflects those of my family. I don't.
Well, you've been.
I would hope that you wouldn't include other family members beyond my core family.
Well, in terms of throwing numbers around, you said that student debt has increased by 1,000% since
980% in 8 years.
I'm sorry?
980%.
That's just
almost
not
1,000.
so. It's increased 118% in the past 8 years.
Well,
So I'm just asking, if you're challenging my figures, I would ask that you get your figures straight about education policy, and that's why we want more questions, because we want to know if this person that we are entrusting, or may entrust to be the Secretary of Education, if she has the breadth and depth of knowledge that we would expect from someone who has that important, that important job. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Franken. I had as many disagreements with Secretary King as you apparently do with Mrs. DeVos, and we're treating her in exactly the same way that we treated him. And I think that's what I would call the golden rule. I
did not hear one member of the committee ask more questions. And here, virtually every member of the minority is asking to ask more questions. And that's a very substantial difference.
We have, because you've got a nominee of the Republican Party, we're not going to treat a Republican nominee differently than we treat a Democratic nominee. We've had the same situation with both of President Obama's nominees. So we'll go to the next.
Chairman, I do want to put in the record that Michael Levitt had 2 rounds.
Michael Levitt was never the education secretary.
Well, Rod Page under Bush had 10-minute rounds. There is other precedent, so that's why my members really are asking.
I appreciate that, Senator Murray, and I appreciate your saying that. I'm trying to be fair by treating Mrs. DeVos in the same way we treated both of President Obama's education nominees. We'll go next to Senator Cassidy.
Mrs. DeVos, thanks. Good to see you again. Enjoyed our meeting in anticipation of this. I'm really struck the kind of reaction your nomination has elicited. So let me just ask some questions. Do you support public education?
Absolutely, Senator.
Man, that's amazing. You would think some would have us think that you do not. Do you believe that all children deserve to have the opportunity to receive quality education?
Absolutely, I do.
Do you support the rights of all children, regardless of income or race? By the way, this means a lot to me, this next one, to have the option to choose the school that meets their child's needs?
Absolutely, I do, and I commend you and your wife for the school that you've started that's specifically focused on dyslexic students.
I will tell you, by the way, my son is very bright, graduated from, speaking of dyslexia, graduated from an inner city school, public school, and then graduated with honors from some fancy school northeast. And my daughter, who has dyslexia, we're able to pay the tuition so that she can have her needs addressed. And not all parents can pay that tuition, so it matters very much to me that a parent, regardless of her income, can get her child's needs addressed. So thank you for doing that. Just a few more. Do you support the belief that decisions affecting our children's education are best left to the states and locals to decide, to allow them to tailor the education policies and programs that best meet the needs of their students?
I do indeed.
Oh my gosh. Do you view the role of the U.S. Secretary of Education as an opportunity to advance your personal education views and agenda?
Not mine personally. I'm going to hopefully be able to advance this President-elect's and also the views of many, many parents nationally.
As Secretary of Education, is it your intention to undermine our nation's public education system?
Not at all.
As Secretary, will you carry out the implementation of federal education laws in a way that reflects the very letter and intent of the law?
Indeed.
Do you intend to mandate, direct, coerce, or control any state, local school district, or school on any education program that is specifically prohibited by the Secretary in federal law, one such example being Common Core?
No.
Do you intend to mandate, direct, coerce, or control any state, local school district, or school to require school choice policies, including private school vouchers or scholarships?
No.
Now, let's just clear that for the record. Next, you mentioned dyslexia. I am passionate about it. 20% of us are dyslexics, 20%. I'm told that 1 out of 4 children of color by age 4 read substantially, by 4th grade, read substantially below grade level. That's important because we learn to read, then we read to learn. If you've not learned to read, you're behind the 8 ball. So that is an issue I'm passionate about. As Secretary of Education, will you commit to working with me and others to find common ways to promote better awareness and understanding of dyslexia? And will you commit to working with me and this committee to develop better federal education policies to ensure that dyslexic children and all students with differences have the resources they need?
I would look forward to that opportunity, Senator.
Now, as Secretary, you may not agree to this one or not. Will you commit to working with me and this committee to develop new federal policies that will ensure the early screening for dyslexia in school are universal screenings for all students in school to ensure that any learning differences are diagnosed early and that the appropriate services are provided to students?
I would look forward to exploring that with you to see whether that's a federal role or whether that's best left to the states, but I would look forward to that opportunity.
That is a fair answer. I have a couple more I could ask, but this meeting is going long. I will thank you for your answers, and I will yield back.
Thank you, Senator.
Thank you, Senator Cassidy. Senator Bennett.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And in view of how fair you've been to me and to other members of the committee, it pains me to say this. I really wish we had a second round of questions, too. I really wish we had the tax returns from this nominee. I don't believe you are a precedent for this. When you became, when you were the nominee, you had been a governor, you'd been the president of a university. John King had been a school principal, had been the commissioner of education of the state of New York. Arnie Duncan had been the superintendent of the Chicago Public Schools. Those were the experiences they brought to their committee hearing, and their records were well known and well established. There is no way in the period of time we have here that we're going to be able to elicit that level of background. So I would ask that some consideration be given to our having additional questions, and that the tax returns be made available to the committee. I want to thank Mrs. DeVos for your willingness to serve and for being here, for your passion about education for your family as well. I agree with you, and the committee members know this, that our public school system is not working for too many of our kids, particularly those living in poverty. I think that's utterly unacceptable, and the fact that we don't pay attention to it, the fact that we treat America's children like they're someone else's children, I think is something that this generation is going to have to pay for in the future. Every kid in this country should have access to a great public school. I support parents' choices among high-quality public schools and charter schools, and I think it plays a critical role in education. But the goal for me has never been school choice for its own end. The goal is high-quality public schools where every kid in every neighborhood can receive a great education. For a kid from a low-income family, there's no difference between, there may be a philosophical difference, but there's no practical difference between forced to attend a terrible school and being given a chance to choose among 5 terrible schools. That's no choice at all, and it's certainly not a meaningful one. In Denver, we made a different deal. A deal that said we're going to create a public choice system, we're going to authorize charters, we're going to create innovation schools and strengthen traditional schools. But without exception, we demanded quality and implemented strong accountability. And as far